So here we go. What is chapter 17 about?
Ethics.
Okay, so it's about the ethics of eating meat. The ethics of eating animals. Somebody other than Sydney, tell me who Peter Singer is.
Saving it for later.
Who is Peter Singer? Somebody other than Sydney. I can tell from her participation lately that she's been reading the book, which is good. Anybody? Peter Singer.
Straight up.
Figures prominently in the chapter.
I did my paper, I didn't read it, I'm sorry.
Did anybody else read the chapter?
No.
Oh my God. What are we going to do today?
Sleep. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Sorry. I misread the 5 paragraphs into being 5 pages. I did not see this.
No, 5 paragraphs.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes. But you
5
think-
paragraphs.
Yes. It was like up to 5 pages though. It should be that much shorter. I did not read that part, so
Okay.
that paper took a long time.
So Sydney's the only person who's read. Me and Sydney are the only 2 people who've read this chapter. What am I going to do?
Riley, did you read?
Riley, did you read the chapter?
Some
Have a seat, Riley.
He's
Sydney.
sucking up.
Sydney, who is Peter Singer?
He's an author that argues for animal liberation.
So he's a philosopher.
Philosopher, yeah.
He's a philosopher who has written a book. Do you recall the name of the book?
Animal liberation.
Animal Liberation. And in this book, he advocates against. Why is my polygon messed up? He advocates against eating animals as a way of getting food. Luckily, you didn't have to have read the whole chapter, but it would have helped because I'm going to engage in what my colleagues refer to as interactive story time with Paul, which is a time-tested teaching technique. Literally, I team teach this course, and when I team teach this other course that I team teach, we get together periodically to talk about the course as we're in the process of teaching it, and we take notes. Are you guys listening?
I'm sorry, I just thought of, so on my paper I put 10:20 instead of 11:20 on the date, and I just thought of that.
You know, that's
I knew, but it-
so not important.
It was just like a brain thing, I'm sorry.
Okay.
They were so tired.
Anyways, go ahead.
Okay. So we sit down periodically to talk about the class as we're doing the class, and when we're sitting in class, we take notes on one another's teaching. And one day we were sitting down to look ahead at the next body of material that we were going to be teaching, and she opens up her notebook where she took notes on the last time that we taught this section, and at the top of the page she had written interactive story time with Paul, which is actually a pretty good description of what we do on the first day of this case study that we're working on. So a little bit of interactive story time. So Peter Singer wrote a book called Animal Liberation. In this book, he advocates against eating meat as a way of getting human energy and nutrition. He has a particular take on why he has this stance, which we'll get to it in a little while. But when I was younger and less well-behaved, I was married, and my former wife's brother is retired. He made it rich in software. He retired at the age of 31. He bought a brownstone on DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. I hope he doesn't ever listen to this lecture online because I'm about to tell him how I acted at his parties. So he would have these parties at his brownstone, and I taught in South Central PA, and where I taught at Shippensburg University wasn't that far from Washington, D.C., and we would occasionally go into Washington just to visit and see the city. And we had a free place to stay in an awesome place on DuPont Circle. And so he would occasionally have parties, and we would show up at these parties, and like just really, really pretentious, wealthy government types at the party. And so you can imagine the kinds of conversations that come up at a thing like that. Very trendy, well-dressed, beautiful people. I am not trendy, nor am I well-dressed, nor am I beautiful, so I was out of place there. And probably acted out because I didn't really fit in. So anyway, when people would be talking about food, because there was a lot of talk about food and drink at a party where there was a lot of food and drink, periodically vegetarianism would come up. And so whenever somebody mentioned that they were vegetarian, I would say, "What kind of vegetarian are you?" And they would look at me strangely, like, "What kind of a question is that?" I'm like, "Well, what I mean is, like, what brand of vegetarianism do you adhere to? What philosophical bent of vegetarianism do you adhere to? Why have you adopted this particular style of eating? I'm just curious. I'm naturally curious." So if you were, are any of you vegetarians? Oh, I'm the only vegetarian in the class for the moment. Vegetarian, trying it out still, 3.5 months in or so. I would say to myself, "Dr. Polinsky, why are you a vegetarian? What brand of vegetarian are you?" And I would say, "I'm an environmental vegetarian. I have been convinced by the data and my own training as a scientist that the lower on the food chain you eat, the less energy gets wasted through maintenance, because with each energy transition, we blow off 90% of the energy in the food that we eat in the form of respiration. And so to eat higher up on the food chain, to be eating meat, basically means that I've blown off the vast majority of the energy that was grown in farm fields in fruits and vegetables and corn and soybeans for that matter. Because as we go up the food pyramid from plants to herbivores to carnivores, we 100% of the energy that is in here, only 10% of that energy makes it into the herbivores, and only 10% of the energy in herbivores makes it into carnivores. It's just really energetically a stupid thing to be doing. The International Panel on Climate Change came out with a report in the summertime that basically said, flying in airplanes is really bad for the environment, but even worse for the environment is eating meat. And it's something that I've known since I was an undergraduate, that it's probably not a wise thing from an energetic standpoint. And so I just finally said, okay, I don't really fly that much anymore because I don't have field sites overseas. There was one year that I had a field site in Puerto Rico, and I had a field site in Hawaii. I made gold status that year, and I held on to gold status for like 5 years after that. Don't ever get gold status on an airline or platinum status on an airline. You'll get spoiled by the space in first class and the free nuts and free booze. And then you'll eventually have to go back to coach, and then your life is basically over. So I don't really do that anymore because my research life has changed, and so if I'm going to do anything, I already buy a Prius. I already live in a 1,200 square foot house. It was built almost 100 years ago. I already bike to school. Like, I need to stop eating meat. So I am an environmental vegetarian. What other kinds of vegetarians might there be?
Question, what is vegetarian?
A vegetarian basically means that you don't eat meat. Oh, so we talked about the taxonomy of eating. So a vegetarian is generally somebody who doesn't eat meat, but might eat things that are products of animals. So, for example, does eat dairy.
Because you eat eggs, and I could have sworn vegetarians where you don't eat any products of animals. So you do eat eggs. So that's vegan, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So this is sometimes referred to as lacto-ovo vegetarianism. You eat milk products, you eat eggs, but you don't eat animals that have become things, have become themselves, but you will eat the products of animals that have become themselves. Most eggs are not fertilized, so you're not eating a little embryo. You're not eating a little embryonic chick, you're actually just eating an unfertilized egg of a hen. So that's a vegetarian. You've probably heard the term pescatarian.
I was just about to ask that.
Pescatarian doesn't eat meat, but doesn't think fish count. Because they'll eat fish. And so they take in protein in the form of fish, but they don't eat chickens and cows and sheep and pigs and things like that. So pescatarian is I wouldn't call them vegetarian because I think fish do count as meat. And so, but it's a person who eats fish but avoids other forms of meat, yes.
It's funny, it's coming from my Catholic background. Fish in the Catholic Church technically are considered not meat because during Advent you can eat fish on Friday.
Not Advent, Lent.
Lent,
Yeah,
sorry.
not a very good
I'm
Catholic.
horrible.
Yeah, during Lent you're allowed to eat fish. Do you know the basis of that?
I'm doing something with during the Bible, but I don't really know.
Does it have to do with when like God made the trial of fish and stuff?
It's a Bible
No.
story.
There's always been this prohibition against eating meat during Lent, and there was a pope, I forget when it was, I don't know, maybe like the 1500s or something like that. And there was a time when he was from a coastal fishing area of Italy, and he wanted to bolster the local economy of the place that he came from, and so he exempted fish from the restriction on consuming meat. As a result, people who are not eating meat, and because Italy was at that time a largely Catholic populace, people who were starving for protein went and bought fish, and that was really good for the place that he came from. So it has nothing to do with anything having to do with religion. It has everything to do, evidently, with economics. So Lent. So yes, Catholics during Lent are pescatarians. Which, when I was a kid growing up Catholic and we got to Lent, I was happy for Lent because fish is kind of expensive and I actually kind of like fish. And so for me, the whole idea of being in Lent is that you give up something that you really like, because Christ gave up something that he really liked, presumably his life. And so it was no great sacrifice to eat fish on Fridays in my household. So we also have vegan. What is vegan?
No animal products.
No animal products, period. So you're just eating fruits and vegetables, grains. No milk-based products, no egg, no fish, no nothing animal product-y. I don't actually know if this is a thing. I've never actually looked it up, but we could look this up. I saw it in a movie and it was funny, and so I like referring to it because I like funny things, but I don't actually know if it's a thing or not. Fruitarian. Only eats fruits and nuts. I'm not sure what their philosophical reason for this, but fruitarianism would be a subset of veganism because they don't even eat vegetable products. They only eat fruits and nuts, the reproductive products of plants.
People live off that?
Evidently, there are concerns about this being a healthy diet or not. Some fruitarians will only eat what falls naturally from a plant, that is, food plants that can be harvested without killing and harming the plant. These foods consist primarily of culinary fruits, nuts, and seeds. Blah 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 blah. Have you guys seen the movie Notting Hill? Hugh Grant, Julia Roberts. You just don't have much of a, well, maybe you do have a social life, which is why you don't watch movies. You go out and interact with humans. Notting Hill, Hugh Grant plays this guy who runs a bookstore, and he meets a famous actress played by Julia Roberts, who's not really having to act much because she's a famous actress playing a famous actress. Anyway, after they have a brief courtship and then they break up, he is heartbroken, and his friends try to set him up. And so there's a series of vignettes of little scenes of him on dates where his friends have invited him and a potential girlfriend over to their house for dinner, and one of them is a fruitarian, and she talks about her fruitarianism, and I thought it was very funny, and so it's the first time in my life that I've ever looked up to see if that was an actual thing rather than just a comedy bit and movie. So there are different varieties. So fewer people are vegan than are vegetarian, fewer people are vegetarian than pescatarian, and fewer people are all of those things than are omnivores. So the title of the book is The Omnivore's Dilemma, and we are omnivores. We have a dentition. Our teeth are the teeth that you would expect an omnivore to have. We have crushing molars in the back of our mouths. We have sharp incisors in the front of our mouths. These big molars in the back of our mouths are used for grinding up things like nuts and seeds and things like this. Sharp incisors are useful for biting off plant material, tearing flesh from bone. We have a dentition that indicates that we are omnivorous. We have a dentition that says that our evolutionary past has been an evolutionary past of omnivory. We will eat plants, we will eat animals, we will eat seeds, fruits, we will eat leafy greens, we'll eat whatever we can put in our mouth that doesn't kill us. And you can put things in your mouth and eat them that will kill you, but that's the last time you'll do it. So we are the product of this omnivorous evolutionary history. And some people would say we're omnivores, we should just eat what we eat because that's what we have evolved to be, and as a result, we shouldn't let the fact that there may be philosophical objections to eating meat get in our way. Omnivores eat anything. Remind us again, we haven't revisited what the omnivore's dilemma is.
All the things we can eat. Why do we eat?
No, why do we eat? What should we eat when we can
Eat anything.
That's the dilemma. What should we eat? This should question. The 3 questions in the CTI program, what are they?
What's real? How do you know?
What can you know? How can you know it?
Something about living, right?
That pesky word should. Should requires a value statement. It requires that you make a decision on a set of values. Dakota, you are eating a blueberry muffin from the looks of it, and drinking some form of coffee, not hot chocolate, not chai tea, coffee and a blueberry muffin. Did you filter that through your belief system and value system before you ordered that blueberry muffin?
No.
No, you didn't. Why would you? I mean, it's a blueberry muffin. Who wouldn't eat a blueberry muffin? Some people would argue that before you eat that blueberry muffin, you should consider that blueberry muffin. Ask yourself, does that blueberry muffin conform to your value system, and are you justified in eating said blueberry muffin?
Sure. I mean, it doesn't go against any of my values, so.
So if you think about it for 2 seconds, you say, well, I don't see anything in this blueberry muffin that goes against my values, which is fine. Eat the blueberry muffin with a clean conscience. But what Peter Singer says is that we oftentimes eat without thinking about this question of should we eat that thing that we're about to consume? So the Omnivore's Dilemma is another one of these should things. What should we eat given that we can eat anything? Should you eat nothing but meat and get rid of what was the name of that diet? Oh man, the one where you eat nothing but meat. The Atkins Diet. You guys know about the Atkins Diet? This was a fad that came around back in the 90s, so it was actually before you were born. When were you born? 98, yeah, it would have come around before you were born. It was a guy, this doctor, who was advocating that if you ate a low-carb, high-meat protein fat diet, that you would lose weight. If you ate nothing but meat, would that be a very healthy diet? No, you'd be lacking lots of essential nutrients that you need. Your cholesterol level would go way, way up. You would probably gain weight rather than lose weight. You might be gaining weight from a different source of calories due to fat, rather than calories due to carbohydrates. But that was one of the things of it, you didn't eat any carbohydrates. But the calories that you gain from fat are really bad for you in other ways because they give you terrible cholesterol and heart disease and everything else. So not the greatest diet in the world. So should you follow the Atkins diet? Probably not, just for health reasons. So this question of should you behave in a particular way becomes something about your values. Is it valuable to you to be healthy? I think monetarily you could argue that there is value to being healthy. Your health costs lower, societal health costs are lower. Lots of good reasons to be healthy. The nice thing about you guys is you guys all look very healthy. Some of you are athletes. Health is easy when you're younger because you have metabolism to help you down the road to health. It gets harder as you get older. So healthy eating, what does that entail? Well, it can entail some of what is on the board, but it doesn't necessarily have to entail what is on the board. So when I ask somebody, what kind of vegetarian are you? If you say that you're a vegetarian, I'm not concerned with what you're eating. So when I say it, I would sometimes get, well, I'm actually a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which means I eat mostly fruits and vegetables, but I also indulge in milk products and eggs. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested in what you eat. I'm interested in why you eat it. So within this taxonomy, the question is, if you're one of these things, why are you one of these things? What are some possible answers to this question? Well, so what kinds of values?
Animal rights.
So you might be an animal rights vegetarian. Describe what that would be.
Well, there's probably a spectrum of animal rights vegetarians.
Yeah, and Peter Singer's on one extreme end of the animal rights vegetarianism
There's like,
spectrum.
shouldn't kill animals, period, or animals should be treated humanely with respect.
So one argument is that we don't treat animals humanely when we're growing them for food. What are some other aspects of animal rights vegetarianism?
Animals are intelligent.
Oh, animals are intelligent. That comes right out of the book, doesn't it, Sydney? Yeah.
Animals are too cute and have feelings too.
I don't know that many
That's her.
many vegetarians would say that that's the reason that they don't eat meat.
Reasons. One of them.
I mean, kind of getting off the animal rights aspect, I know that vegetarians claim that they feel healthier, they feel better. They have more energy through the day.
So you may be a health, what did I say, Heath? You might be a health vegetarian, take on a healthier diet. More fruits and vegetables generally makes in your diet generally makes you better. in terms of health. That's why the U.S. Department of Agriculture advocates that you take in a big chunk of your diet as fruits and vegetables. When we looked at the food plate, the bulk of the food plate was made up of three subcomponents. It was fruits, vegetables, and dairy, and very little intake in form of grains and meat. So there are health vegetarians. Other things that animal rights vegetarians might have. I'm going to remove cuteness because I don't really think that's a thing. Sorry, Katie. They're not treated humanely. They're intelligent. This is very possibly why pescatarians are okay eating fish, because fish are not viewed as having the same level of intelligence as a cow or a sheep or a pig.
Kind of goes under the humanely thing, but capacity to suffer.
Yeah, so this is where Peter Singer comes from. Do they have the capacity to suffer? And we'll come back to that, but let's explore some other types of vegetarianism. So there's the animal rights vegetarian, there is the health-oriented vegetarian. What are the reasons might people take on this particular dietary lifestyle?
Religious.
I told you about myself, I'm an environmental vegetarian. There are religious vegetarians, people who follow religions that basically forbid the consumption of meat because of not any of these other reasons. It's just a belief system. It's part of their belief system, and they don't believe that it's good to take the life of an animal. Yeah.
There's this documentary I watched. There's a lot of people who are into fitness who are like plant-based diets.
Oh yeah, I would say that's health.
That would go under health.
I would put that
Just
under health.
fitness? No.
Yeah. It's weird. You guys may have heard of another dietary fad, the Paleo Diet. This is another one of those low-carb, high-protein kinds of diets. But if you're really going to be paleo, if you're going to really live like a hunter-gatherer, what you should mainly be eating is plants, insects, and about 1,200 calories a day. And I guarantee you, nobody on a paleo diet is eating mainly plants, insects, and 1,200 calories a day. I hate stuff like that. Paleo diet. Oh, live like our ancestors. You know, eat like a Paleolithic human would eat. What that means is you're on the verge of starving to death on a daily basis.
Who wants to do that?
Well, they don't, because that's also not how they eat. What other kind of vegetarians might you have? I just gave you a clue to one of them.
Fad vegetarian?
It's a fad vegetarian. You really piss people off at a party when you reveal them as fad vegetarians. Why are you a vegetarian? Well, what do you mean, why am I a vegetarian? I'm like, what's your philosophical rationale behind being a vegetarian? Oh, you're a fad vegetarian. I'm not popular at parties.
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
There is a certain amount of truth to that. Fine, you want to chase fads? Go for it. If that affects your diet and you end up being a healthier human being as a result of it, all the better. I would prefer that you be vegetarian for some other reason that you think it's cool, but if that's your rationale, that's your rationale. It's your life. It's not mine. But then don't get offended when somebody refers to you as a fad vegetarian at a party.
Well, they don't think of themselves that way though.
Oh, well, certainly not. But the fact that they couldn't answer the question as to why they were a vegetarian, that reveals them for what their real reason is, which is they don't really have a good reason.
So basically,
I'm also really judgmental. Sorry.
So basically, all y'all are basically in competition to determine who's the most vegetarian knowing of all people. So it's kind of like
No.
religious battle.
No, not really. I'm actually just curious as to what people's rationales are. Because if you're a fitness-based vegetarian, you know, or a health-based vegetarian, I'm interested to know, have you actually reaped the benefits of that? For myself, I'm an environmental vegetarian. I hope that I reap some health benefits as a result of it. I'm 53 years old. I should have asked you guys to guess how old I am.
You said it before.
Oh, have I? My father died at 64. I certainly hope I reap the benefits of health coming from switching to a vegetarian diet. He died of a heart attack, not surprising. I'm Polish. Lots of Polish people die of heart attacks. I spoke to a Methodist pastor who was a friend of mine, pretty close friends, which is why you could say this to me, which you would not normally say to a person who had just had their father die. He said, was it a surprise? I'm like, was it a surprise that he died? Not really. Was it a surprise that he died that Sunday? Sure. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I mean, my dad, he was chronically obese, he smoked, and he drank too much. And my Methodist pastor friend said, the trifecta of death. I'm like, Brian, only you can say that to me. Do not say that to one of your parishioners when one of their family members died. But my dad had the trifecta of death. He was a chronically unhealthy lifestyle kind of person. I go out and ride my bike during the week, and on the weekends, I know that the bike ride that I went on this past weekend would have killed my father at my age. When my dad was 53, he would not be able to just pick up a bike, go on a 50-mile bike ride at the kind of speeds that I travel, and not killed over and died from a heart attack at the age of 53. I am combating my own kind of genetic legacy. All the people in my family are big. They, in many cases, have terrible eating habits that have made them big. And if I don't do something to stave off death, I'm going to die at 64 of a heart attack. Which is good, because if the stock market starts tanking, my retirement's not going to be all that great. But my goal is not to die at 64. My goal is to live to be 88 or 96 or something like that. My grandmother on my mother's side lived to be 96. So somewhere in my family there's some genes for longevity. They just don't come from my dad. So if I reap the benefits of having a healthier diet because I adopt vegetarianism for environmental reasons, then that's just like an added bonus. But that's not my primary reason for doing it. As a matter of fact, my friend Richard wants me to ride the triple bypass again next year. I need to keep my protein intake up from now until July, because I'm going to need that protein when the time comes. Now, if I can also drop 10 pounds, that's even better, because it's a lot of climbing. So all kinds of reasons for being vegetarian. If you're going to do it, I would just like to know why you're doing it, and as you're doing it, do you actually experience the benefits of doing that your philosophical outlook actually claim? If you're a health vegetarian, is it actually making you healthier? If you're an animal rights vegetarian, do you feel better about the fact that you're not contributing to the plight of animals that are found in constrained animal feeding operations? If you are a religious vegetarian, I'm really interested in being vegetarian makes you feel closer to whatever God you worship. Fasting can cause people to have religious experiences because they become low glucose. They come to a state of low glucose, and when you're in a state of low glucose, you experience hallucinations, and you can have religious experiences that you would not experience if you were not doing that to yourself. So I'm interested in these things not to pass judgment on people. I'm interested in if being a vegetarian actually gets you closer to God. And if it does, that's great. If it doesn't, then bummer, because you're doing this and it's not achieving the goals that you kind of have set for yourself. if you don't really have any reason for doing it, then the conversation kind of falls flat, because like, okay, well, I don't have anything else to talk to you about on this front. You know, how did you like the Stros in the series this year? Which I don't know anything about because I'm not a baseball fan, so I'm also terrible at that kind of small talk at a party. Suffering. If you're an animal rights vegetarian, so I'm going to get rid of these other kinds of vegetarian because they're not really relevant to chapter 17, because Peter Singer is an animal rights vegetarian. There are other animal rights vegetarians. One animal rights vegetarian would say, this is the rationale of another group of vegetarians, which basically says that animals have a right to be alive, just like you have a right to be alive. The rationale behind this is if you try and kill an animal, almost always it will fight you if you're trying to kill it, indicating that it wants to live. It has a volitional will to live, and as a result, you should respect that will to live and let it live. This is countered by omnivores who say, well, we come from a hunting and gathering evolutionary past, and we evolved to kill other organisms. So a variety of different animal rights perspectives. The one that Peter Singer says is, he basically says, you know, in the case of some people, they say that you should only not eat things, not eat animals that are intelligent. When we say this, what do we mean by this? When somebody says we shouldn't eat organisms because they have intelligence, they have sentience, they have the ability to think and reason, kid.
So maybe it comes to like fish and cows. And cows have bigger brains, so you could argue that they have feelings and that they understand emotion in some way, shape, or form. They have a motherly instinct toward their kids. Fish are a little bit different.
Fish have a motherly instinct towards their offspring. They make nests and they guard them against predators.
They're still fish.
So, Caden actually is making the point that I want to make. I'm going to put a list of species up on the board, and then we're going to go through in a minute, and we're going to say, would you eat it?
Can you specify what kind of bird you're talking about?
Just any bird. It could be a quail that you shoot out in the wild. It could be an ostrich that you would buy from the market, an ostrich or an emu if you go to the exotic meat department of your local. You can, don't look at me this way, you can buy ostrich and emu. People raise emus on farms to sell the meat. It could be a turkey or a chicken, just any bird, yeah.
Would this be like, would I eat this on like an everyday basis? Not necessarily an everyday basis.
No, would you find it ethically okay to eat these
Okay,
things?
ethically okay.
You might not eat it because you're like,
It's gross.
that's gross.
Yeah.
So these are the only
Yeah.
things we have access to?
No, he said if it.
No, we're gonna go through them one by one and discuss them. Pigs.
Based off their
Not
intelligence.
obviously, that's what we're talking.
Like ethically, okay.
How many of you would have a problem with eating spiders?
Just the
Fried one.
taste of it.
Ethically.
We'll try it.
Not a problem with eating spiders.
Try it.
What if I told you that there is a species of spider that lives in Southeast Asia, and during its life it goes around its environment and it learns what all of the mating rituals are of all of the other spider species that live in that area. And it learns them because it needs to know them, because when it comes to a web of a spider, it senses the pheromones on the web of the spider, ascertains what species of spider is living on that web, reaches into its memories and says, this is this species of spider. Its mating ritual is to pluck the strands of the web in a particular way. And it plucks the strands in a particular way. It coaxes the female out of her retreat at the center of the web. The female comes over to the edge of the web thinking that it's a male spider of her same species asking her to mate with him. When it gets there, it finds that it's this predatory spider species that jumps on it, kills it, and eats it. In another case, there's a retreat that is hung from a single strand of webbing from a branch. At the bottom of that single strand of webbing, there's a bundle of leaves that have been woven together, and there's an opening at the bottom of this woven together pile of leaves, an opening that allows the spider to go up in there. That's where the spider lays her eggs and cares for her offspring. That's where she lives. The way that the male spider signals to the female inside of this pile of leaves that he's there and wants to mate with her is he lowers himself down on a strand of webbing, gets on top of the leaves, and begins rocking the retreat back and forth in this kind of undulating way. That motion signals to the female, there's a male on top of my pile of leaves that wants to mate with me. She comes out, climbs up the pile of leaves that are woven together with her own silk, comes face to face with this predatory spider that then jumps on her, kills her, and eats her. And they can catalog 40 or 50 different behavioral repertoires so that any spider that they come into contact with, they will mimic the mating behavior of that spider and use it to lure an unsuspecting spider to its death. They've also created these three-dimensional mazes where they put a prey item in a particular part of an aquarium, and then they build this three-dimensional maze, and you can only get to the prey item if you can look at the three-dimensional maze, figure out what the path is to the prey item, and then follow that path and get to it. And you will see these spiders, the same species, you will see these same spiders sit there and look at the aquarium, and you can follow their eyes because they have very, very good eyesight, and you can see them moving not only the retinas of the eyes, but you can also see them tilting their heads. And they will basically sit in one spot. They will look at all the various options to get to the fly that you've tethered with a little piece of thread. They will look at all of the options, and then they will embark upon the option that is most likely to succeed, and they almost always pick the right option and get the prey item. They will also sometimes, not dealing with spiders, if they see an insect on a tree, this spider that I'm talking about is in a group of spiders that are called jumping spiders. On a tree, if there's an insect down here, and the spider is up here, the spider basically calculates how far out it needs to jump. It spins webbing out of its spinnerets, but it can shut off the production of webbing out of the spinnerets, so it jumps horizontally away from the tree, tethered to the tree, stops the production of webbing such that then this thing falls like a pendulum right down on top of the insect. This spider is intelligent. Is it still okay to eat it?
Done.
Honestly,
Yes.
one, guys with
Yes.
girlfriends should not go to
Yes.
Southeast Asia because they're done.
Yes.
Yeah. Also,
I would
no
smash
spider
it.
should have the
Smash.
intelligence to be like, I'm scared for my life now.
It's a freaky spider. If you ever want to look it up, it's in the genus Portia. The species is Fimbriatus. There's a guy in New Zealand who has studied the hell out of this species. It's one of the coolest spiders on the planet from a behavioral standpoint. How do you feel about eating the spider now?
I would just kill it. And
You feel the same?
I'd smash it.
Probably you would
Yeah.
just smash it.
How big is it?
It's tiny. It's like that big.
Would it taste good?
You know, I've never eaten spider.
Put a little
I've
salt
never
on
eaten
it.
cider either.
I can see
It'd
that.
probably be crunchy, but it has a big abdomen. It would be full of protein for as small as it is. If you ate enough of them, you can make a diet out of it. You probably wouldn't eat it because you would find it disgusting, but you don't have any qualms with killing it because it's a spider. We'll explore that later. Insects. No problem eating insects?
No. Wait, okay, wait, is our snails considered insects?
No, snails are gastropods. Different group of organisms altogether. We could put them up here.
Escargot, dude.
Snails, people would eat snails. They do eat
Escargot is
snails.
so good.
So you would eat snails. You don't have any qualms with killing spiders, whether you kill them for the pleasure of killing a spider, or whether you kill them to eat them, it doesn't really matter. You don't respect the life of spiders, in spite of the fact that some spiders are quite intelligent. Insects.
Snails, but man.
You don't have any problem with offing some insects, either for food or for anything else. How do you feel about fish? Don't have any problem eating fish. Any of you ever had frog legs?
Yes.
No, but I want to.
Frog legs? Oh, so you've had them. You want to have them. Any of you guys have qualms? You want to try them also?
I would try them, yeah.
You would try them? Okay.
Just chicken.
Snake.
The thing with fish and frogs and snakes is like, there's a difference between just killing them or like for the purpose of killing them and eating them.
So you would have a problem killing them just for the pleasure of killing
Yes,
them,
yes.
but you would not have a problem with killing them for food?
No.
Okay, so you're okay with snakes? Birds?
Yes.
Yeah, we eat birds all the time. Cows?
Yes.
Okay, there's a mixture. Some people are pro cow, some people are minus cows.
So
You
good.
think cows are cute?
Yeah, I don't eat cow.
You don't eat cow
No.
because
Well, because like it's
They're
better
cute.
for your body, it's better for the environment,
No.
and they're cute.
and they're cute. That's fine. How do you feel about sheep?
No.
So once again, there's some people who are okay with sheep and some people who are not. Pigs?
Yes.
Same, yes.
They're too
Yes.
good not to eat.
What?
It's too good not to eat.
Too good not to eat, but chances are pigs are more intelligent than both cows and sheep.
Yep,
But
that's
bacon.
also true.
But bacon, okay. So the person who's the
Yes.
person who's normally going
So
against
bad.
meat are getting rid of pigs on the basis of bacon. African lowland gorillas.
Do people eat those?
Oh yeah, bushmeat. It's called bushmeat in Africa.
I'll try it. I'll try it.
No.
Clayton?
Try gorilla?
Yes.
Sydney?
No.
No.
Brandon?
I'm gonna go with no on this one.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 2 out of 8 are on the yes, and 6 out of 8 are on the no. Chimpanzees.
Yeah, I would.
Wow, the same 2 out of 8.
I'm a hungry dude, man.
6 out of 8. Plus minus. Humans.
User.
Each a fellow human.
Why are you contemplating it?
I'm not contemplating.
Looks
it.
like you haven't said no yet.
How many of you would eat a human?
What?
Well, wait,
No,
what
just
about
like
like
circumstances.
Alive or dead?
Whoa! I'm telling Kelsey, Brandon.
Do it.
Let's-
I'm like, I'm worried.
Let's assume for the moment that it is packaged at the grocery store. We'll get to other situations in a few minutes.
Wait, okay, what was the,
Eat a human. Don't bring up other circumstances.
Oh, okay.
If you walked up to the meat counter, there were beer brats, jalapeno brats, some steaks, some ground chuck, and Homo sapiens. Would you buy it?
No.
Of course not.
Of course not. You guys aren't cannibals. One of your siblings.
baby?
No chance.
No.
Okay.
You know, but there's also other circumstances to all these.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm gonna get to those in a minute, but I want you to look at the broad scope of this. What has happened over the broad scope of this?
It's gotten harder and harder to say yes to.
It's gotten harder and harder to say yes. Why?
I feel
More
like
like
as you've
us.
gone on.
They're more like us. It's way easier to kill and eat something when it doesn't look anything like us. Which is why we don't have any problem stepping on a spider that's not doing anything to you, because we don't really have anything in common with a spider. So it's a spider, maybe you're wigged out by its 8 legs, maybe you're wigged out because it's hairy, But in most cases, spiders aren't doing anything bad to you. And what spiders are ultimately doing is they're running around your environment, eating bugs that you probably don't want to have around, eating insects around that you don't want around. They're eating roaches, they're eating pests on your flowers, they're eating pests in your garden. If you have more spiders around your house, you tend to have fewer insects. And so spiders are actually beneficial, but we don't have any problem squishing a spider, mainly because it's really not like us at all. There's nothing that we have in common with spiders. We don't have a problem with squishing insects when they get into our house, rather than picking them up and taking them back outside where they belong, because it's just easier to squish them than it is to capture them, and we don't share anything in common with insects. They're unfamiliar to us. As things get more and more familiar, things get cuter, or they begin to look more and more like us, we begin to have more and more qualms. So there could be another animal rights activist category, which is, what would be a good term for this individual who avoids meat, but only if it looks sufficiently like a human? Weirdo. Oh, I know. A humanitarian, vegetarian, in that if it looks close enough to a human, or if I in some way think that it looks cute or something like that, that I'm going to avoid it. It's a stupid term. It's a stupid category. And Peter Singer would say it's a stupid category. Why? What is his criterion? What's his do or die criterion for why you shouldn't eat meat? You shouldn't eat something that has the capacity to suffer. That is his take-home point. That is his do or die criterion. Does it have the capacity to suffer? If the answer is yes, do not eat. If the answer is no, go ahead and look it up. Under these criteria, what would Peter Singer say about each of these species that is on the board?
Don't eat them.
He would say you can't eat any of these things, because all of these things have the capacity to suffer. They all have mechanisms by which they receive stimuli from their environment, and they respond to those stimuli. If you heat up a snail too hot, it's going to ooze away from the heat, because the heat is a negative stimulus if the heat gets too hot, and it wants to avoid those negative stimuli. So all of these organisms have the ability to sense their environment and will actively avoid stimuli that are unpleasant, dangerous, etc. He would say you can't eat those because they all demonstrate the capacity to suffer. What do you think of that as a criterion?
I don't agree.
Why not?
I'm not exactly sure.
Well, that's not a very good reason, is it?
I haven't put enough
You can
thought
take
into it
suffering
yet.
out of the equation.
How so?
Like the humane ways that they kill pigs and food processing plants. They use the stun gun first and then they hang up the pig.
So that's in the killing.
I mean, it has the capacity to suffer, but
He would argue
They
that there
take
is no
suffering.
humane way to kill something. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you've stunned a pig, does it suffer being stunned?
Yeah.
no.
How about I get a stun gun and stun you?
It has no idea that it's been stunned though.
If I
Still
stun
suffer.
you, or how do you know it doesn't have an idea that it's been stunned?
I don't.
Okay,
It's been
so
stunned.
when you put an electrical shock through this animal to knock it out, what's happening is you're putting electricity into it. The nerves in your body are basically little electrical conduits channeling electrical impulses down the nerve, And to think that when you give it that stunning, that it's not going to feel pain, just goes against everything we know about neurology. In the same way that if I drop a 5-pound weight on your foot, it may not cause you lasting damage, but in that instance, you will hurt. Trust me. I've dropped things 5 pounds and heavier on my foot. So the idea that the way that you kill a pig or a cow or anything else is going to alleviate their pain and suffering is ridiculous, because they all have nerves. They have the same nerves that you do. And so there are some ways in which you can stun them with electricity. With cows, there's actually, they go down this track, and there's this hydraulically operated or pneumatically operated, looks like the head of a big sledgehammer. And when they get in position, this thing shoots out and clunks them in the head and goes right through their brain, kills them virtually instantly. But to think that in that split second before they're actually dead, they're not feeling anything, just defies everything that we once again know about how the brain works and how nerves operate. So the idea of humanely killing something is something of a lark, if you know anything about the underlying biology. Yeah, Kate?
I think that since they're animals and they don't necessarily have the brains or the emotions like us, it's hard for us to empathize with their suffering. Because like me, I'm a hunter, like I'll hunt, and the amount of times that I have had to, after shooting a bird, and had to wring its neck like over and over to make sure it actually dies. Like I didn't even think about the suffering. Like yes, it get dead, but it's just I want to eat you. Like let me just eat you. So I don't.
So suffering isn't a criterion that resonates with you. It
No.
happens to be one that does resonate with Peter Singer. He would say that you're amazingly cool for doing that. So if you kill something, you should kill it in the quickest possible way if you're going to kill it, to alleviate as much suffering as you
Well,
can.
what does he think about like the conservation of animals in case like overpopulation of certain animals? Like, excuse me, how would he want to? How would you say would be the best way to?
Well, we have an overpopulation, so we're farming them.
Let me come back to that in a minute. You had something to say, and I want to get you before I get to you.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say that, for the suffering thing,
Mhm.
if they're out in the wild and they're killed by another animal, that's probably gonna be more suffering than if they're killed quickly. So they have to die eventually.
Okay, so somebody else had their hand up? Yeah.
I did. I was gonna say real quick.
It's okay.
I think the suffering thing,
Uh-huh.
since we're not there to see it, we don't really think about it. But like if you were in the wild and you were killing an animal and you sat there and you saw it suffering, you would feel horrible. You would want to put it out of its misery.
Sure.
So since we're not there to witness the suffering, we don't really think about it, and we kind of just gloss over it, and it's not a big deal to us.
The way we create our food removes us from much of the negative aspects of growing meat that we would normally be subjected to if we lived on a farm and butchered our own animals. Have any of you ever butchered your animals for eating?
Yes,
You have? You hunt, so that doesn't.
Well, yeah,
surprise
oh
me.
no, chickens though, we harvest chickens.
Oh my God, what happened to you the first time you butchered a chicken? What happened?
I honestly, I'll be honest, that is probably the most gruesome thing I've ever seen.
Describe it
was
for me,
homemade-
Caden.
It was with we were best friends with our like Mennonite Amish friends, alright, and they have like a shit ton of chickens that we always went and helped harvest. They would they had like traffic cones stuck to a plyboard. They would stick the chicken's head first down into it, and then you just cut its neck and let it bleed out.
Uh-huh.
And then they have like 4 different machines by which you like, after it bleeds out, you have like 4 different machines by which you like take the feathers out, take the insides out, a whole bunch of stuff like that, and then take the chickens home. It's the best chicken you'll ever have, but yeah, it was pretty disgusting, gruesome. We did.
They're smart enough to put it inside of a traffic cone.
Yes.
I grew up on a farm. We had chickens. When it's time for me to learn how to butcher the chickens, we were not smart enough to put it into a traffic cone, even though my dad was in road construction. We lived in Central Texas, and in Central Texas there are these hills that have kind of this shape to them. Our single wide trailer house was on this level, and on the level below us was a horseshoe pit, and it's also where we butchered our chickens, and there were a couple of more levels down. It's this sedimentary rock in Central Texas. So my mom was like, okay, you're like 7 years old, you're old enough to go and butcher the chicken. So So I grab a chicken out of the hen house, I go down to this level. We have a stump that is the butchering stump. Put the chicken on, grab the chicken by the feet. I've seen my parents do this a gajillion times. Put the chicken, grab it by the feet, put it on the stump, take the hatchet, whack its head off. As soon as you whack its head off, that thing takes off flying. Its head is on the stump, and there's a headless chicken that takes off flying and starts flying down the hill.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like,
It's.
oh crap! Dinner is flying away without a head. And so I start hauling ass down the hill to try and keep up with this headless chicken flying away. And the nice thing about a headless chicken is it's not going to fly very far, but it flew a couple of 100 yards without a head before it finally landed, and I was able to pick it up. And by that time, it had pretty much bled out and was dead and everything else. A memorable first butchering of a chicken for Paul Kowinski. I learned after that you best keep a really firm hold on the legs of that thing when you go to butcher it. Butchering animals, converting animals into feed is sometimes a messy, smelly, seemingly disgusting process. Poke feeders. I've shown you where this is. If you go to Google Earth, you can look up poke feeders. What I want you to do for homework for Friday, because we're talking about, do animals suffer when we kill them? Do animals suffer when we raise them? I want you to do two things between now and Friday. I want you to go and read chapter 4 in Michael Pollan's book, which we skipped over earlier. This has to do with poke feeders. It's called The Feedlot. At Poke Feeders, at the time that Pollan wrote his book, they raised 37,000 head of cattle at a time at Poke Feeders. This is Poke Feeders out in western Kansas. I want you to go onto Google Earth, use the measurement tool to basically create a polygon. So under the measurement tool, you can have it do a line or a path or a polygon, outline Poke Feeders, and figure out how much square footage is available at Poke Feeders. I want you to measure the size of your dorm room. And I want you to figure out what's the average body size of humans in the United States. And what we're going to do at the beginning of class on Friday is we're going to take the density of animals and their size, which is a harvested cow is about 1,100 pounds. And we're going to basically see how many pounds per square foot of cow there is at Poke Feeders. We're going to calculate how many pounds of square foot there are in your dorm room, and we're going to build an equivalency between how much biomass is stored per unit area at Poke Feeders, and translate that into, if you were housed at William Jewell College the way cows are housed at Poke Feeders, would you want to live that way? Well, you're shaking your head no, but you haven't done the calculations.
I've seen it though.
So that's where we'll start as we continue to explore this idea of animal suffering. And read the chapter that you haven't read, chapter 17, also for then.